He was tall, elegant, and calm, the kind of man whose presence filled a room even when he said nothing. To millions of viewers, Pernell Roberts, the man behind Adam Cartwright in Bonanza, was the very image of quiet strength and moral grace. But behind that calm, gentlemanly mask lived a storm. Hollywood adored him, but Hollywood never truly understood him. While others smiled for the cameras and played the fame game, Pernell stood apart. Fierce, unbending, and unafraid to speak the truth, even when it burned every bridge around him. He wasn't just another actor on a Western set. He was a man of principle trapped inside an industry built on pretense. And what most people don't know is that Pernell Roberts carried within him a private list of the few men in Hollywood he could not forgive. Men he believed had betrayed the integrity of their art, their word, or their soul. Those names weren't written anywhere, but every person close to him knew. Once you lost Pernell's respect, you lost it forever. Today, we'll uncover that hidden list. The 5 men Pernell Roberts truly despised, the shocking confrontations, the silent feuds, and the brutal honesty that made him both respected and feared. But before we get there, we must understand where this unbreakable sense of conviction came from. The lonely childhood, the restless ambition, and the quiet fire that shaped one of Hollywood's most misunderstood men. Pernell Elvin Roberts Jr. was born on May 18, 1928, in Waycross, Georgia, a small, sleepy town deep in the American South. Life there was simple, yet harsh, shaped by the long shadows of the Great Depression. His father, Pernell Sr., worked tirelessly as a sales manager for Dr. Pepper, while his mother, Minnie Myrtle Morgan Roberts, nurtured his imagination and love for learning. Even as a boy, Pernell was different. While other kids were chasing footballs or trouble, he was drawn to music, books, and performance. He played the horn in the school band, sang in church, and found joy in the rhythm of a melody more than the roar of a crowd. His teachers saw a quiet intensity in him, the kind that burned slowly but deeply. Still, acting wasn't part of the plan. After high school, he followed what seemed like the sensible path, enrolling at Georgia Tech to study engineering. Yet the world of numbers and blueprints soon felt suffocating to a soul that longed for expression. In 1946, at just 18, he joined the United States Marine Corps, serving for 2 years. There, amid the rigid discipline of military life, he found comfort once again in music, playing the tuba and horn in the Marine Corps band. Music was his sanctuary, his rebellion, and perhaps his truest self. When his service ended, Pernell returned home not with medals, but with clarity. He knew now that he wasn't built to follow orders, he was built to question them. He enrolled at the University of Maryland, where the stage finally called to him in full force. The first time he performed before an audience, something inside him awakened. Acting was no longer just a pastime, it was destiny taking shape. In a move that many called reckless, but he called necessary, Pernell dropped out of college to pursue acting full-time. He packed up his dreams, his horn, and his conviction and set out for New York City, the beating heart of American theater. There, he joined the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, scraping by with odd jobs while sharpening his craft. The struggle was real, the pay was miserable, but the fire inside him never dimmed. Then in 1952, everything began to change. He landed his first professional role in The Man Who Came to Dinner. It was small, but for Pernell, it was monumental, the first crack of light through a long, uncertain tunnel. From that moment on, he wasn't chasing fame, he was chasing truth. After that first taste of success, Pernell Roberts threw himself fully into the world of theater. He was powerful, magnetic, and uncompromising. The kind of performer who didn't just act a role but lived it. Audiences were mesmerized. His deep, resonant voice and natural intensity gave life to some of the greatest works ever written. Macbeth, The Taming of the Shrew, and Romeo and Juliet. Those early years in New York's Shakespeare Festival forged his reputation as a serious, disciplined actor, not a celebrity chasing applause, but a craftsman devoted to truth. And soon, Hollywood came calling. In 1958, he made his big-screen debut in Desire Under the Elms, alongside Sophia Loren and Burl Ives. The critics took notice. Pernell had the presence of a man born for the camera. That same year, he appeared in The Sheep Man, a Western that hinted at the genre that would soon define his career. Then came 1959, the year that changed everything. NBC was launching a bold new series, a sprawling Western epic called Bonanza. The show centered on the Cartwright family, who ran a massive ranch called the Ponderosa. Pernell was cast as Adam Cartwright, the eldest son, intelligent, composed, and fiercely moral. The moment the show premiered, it became a phenomenon. Week after week, millions of families gathered around their televisions to watch life on the Ponderosa unfold. But while the world fell in love with Adam Cartwright, the man behind the role was quietly growing restless. The scripts, he felt, lacked substance. The characters rarely changed. The stories avoided the social truths that mattered most. Pernell didn't want to spend his life playing a man who never evolved, or worse, pretending that everything in the West was simple and clean when he knew history was far more complicated. He began clashing with producers, demanding better writing and more depth. When they refused, he pushed harder, not out of arrogance, but out of conviction. Behind the scenes, his determination earned both respect and resentment. Some saw him as a brave truth teller, others as a troublemaker who refused to play the game. In 1965, at the peak of his fame, when Bonanza was one of the most watched shows on television, Pernell Roberts made a decision few in Hollywood would dare make. He walked away. He turned his back on fame, fortune, and comfort, choosing instead to follow his own compass, wherever it might lead. For all his calm presence and measured voice, Pernell Roberts was a man who carried strong opinions like fire beneath still water. He respected honesty, despised hypocrisy, and refused to smile for people he didn't believe in. And in the smoke-filled parties of 1960s Hollywood, that made him a dangerous man, one who could not be bought, silenced, or charmed. Among his peers, there were 5 names that stood out. 5 men who, in Pernell's eyes, embodied everything he could not stand about the business he loved. Each feud revealed something about his character, his stubborn integrity, his pain, and his refusal to compromise. Or was Michael Landon? At first, their relationship seemed cordial. Pernell admired the young, charismatic actor who played his on-screen brother, Little Joe. But as the years went by, Landon's ambition began to clash with Roberts' ideals. Behind the smiles, tension simmered. Landon's growing influence on Bonanza, writing, directing, even reshaping the scripts to highlight himself, infuriated Roberts. One day, Pernell reportedly confronted him. "You're not trying to improve the show," he said coldly. "You're trying to make yourself more important." From that moment, their friendship was over. They spoke only when the camera demanded it. To the public, they remained brothers. Behind the scenes, silence and resentment ruled. Years later, when Landon became a national icon again with Little House on the Prairie, Roberts could only shake his head. "It's more of the same," he said. "Still playing cowboy, still playing saint." It was the kind of blunt honesty only Pernell Roberts could deliver. 2. Dan Blocker with Dan Blocker, the beloved gentle giant who played Hoss Cartwright. The conflict was born not from anger, but from heartbreak. In the early years, the two were close. Both were trained actors, both valued depth and realism. But when Pernell began speaking out against the show's weak writing and lack of social conscience, Dan chose to stay quiet. To Pernell, that silence felt like betrayal. He once said bitterly, Dan had the heart, but not the courage. He chose comfort over doing what was right. Their friendship began to wither when Roberts once stormed off, set over what he called a humiliating script. Blocker calmly kept filming. Later, Pernell confronted him quietly. "You had a choice," he said. "You always had a choice." They never truly spoke again after that day. 3. Chuck Connors. The feud with Chuck Connors, a star of The Rifleman, began far from the Ponderosa. They met at a charity gala honoring Western legends, a night meant for celebration. But what Pernell saw behind the curtain disgusted him. Connors, adored by fans, was reportedly rude and dismissive toward crew members, barking orders at assistants like they were beneath him. To Roberts, that arrogance was unforgivable. He approached Connors backstage and said what no one else dared. "You're a fake, all hat, no soul." Connors snapped back, mocking him as a bitter man who couldn't handle fame. The shouting match ended their relationship before it ever began. From then on, Roberts referred to Connors privately as a man hollow on the inside, obsessed with his image, blind to his humanity. 4. Lorne Greene. Among all the clashes in his life, none cut deeper than the silent war between Pernell Roberts and Lorne Greene, the man who played his on-screen father, Ben Cartwright. To millions of fans, their relationship looked warm, genuine, almost sacred, a model of father-son love. But when the cameras stopped rolling, that illusion faded. To Roberts, Lorne Greene wasn't the wise, kind patriarch audiences adored. He was a man too content with Hollywood's comfort, too willing to accept mediocrity for the sake of fame. While Pernell fought for the scripts that carried meaning and moral complexity, Greene remained loyal to the producers, smiling through storylines that Roberts found hollow. He once confided to a friend, Lorne chose comfort over courage. As the seasons went by, tension thickened like smoke on set. Greene's calm authority commanded quiet obedience from everyone except Pernell. And that defiance created an invisible wall between them. When Roberts finally walked away from Bonanza in 1965, leaving behind one of the biggest paychecks on television, Greene was one of the few who didn't try to stop him. That silence, that lack of understanding, wounded Pernell more than any argument could. Years later, when asked why he left, Roberts answered in his trademark bluntness, "I just couldn't spend the rest of my life taking off my hat and saying, 'Yes, Pa.'" To him, Bonanza had become a gilded cage, and Greene, its gatekeeper. For James Drury, if Lorne Greene represented complacency, James Drury, star of The Virginian, symbolized something even worse in Pernell's eyes, moral silence. Their feud wasn't about fame or acting styles, it was about beliefs. Roberts had always been outspoken about injustice. He marched for civil rights, spoke against racism, and openly criticized the Vietnam War, all at a time when Hollywood avoided controversy like a disease. Drury, on the other hand, believed politics had no place in entertainment. To him, actors should stick to acting. Their opposing values clashed in the 1970s during a televised panel discussion about television's future. Pernell challenged Hollywood for feeding audiences comfort food instead of truth. Drury fired back, saying, "The public doesn't want sermons, they want entertainment." The exchange turned bitter. Cameras stopped rolling, but neither man would shake the other's hand. Later, Roberts confided to a friend, Drury was never just an actor. He was a spokesman for keeping things the same. What enraged him most was Drury's silence during the civil rights movement, a time when millions marched for equality, and Hollywood's loudest voices stayed quiet. To Pernell, that silence wasn't neutrality, it was betrayal. Each feud revealed the same truth. Pernell Roberts didn't hate easily, but when he did, it wasn't out of vanity or jealousy. It came from disappointment. Disappointment that others didn't share his hunger for truth or his courage to fight for it. For all his righteous anger and sharp intellect, Pernell Roberts carried a loneliness that fame could never heal. Behind that strong voice and the steady stare was a man haunted by the cost of his convictions. He had fought for truth in his art, but in doing so, he lost friends, comfort, and at times, himself. His personal life reflected that same restlessness. He married 4 times, each relationship beginning with hope and ending in heartbreak. His first wife, Vera Mary, was a respected theater professor. Together, they shared a deep love for the stage and had a son, Jonathan Christopher Roberts, whom Pernell adored. But as his career grew, so did the distance between them. His restless spirit and long absences drove a wedge that no love could close. By 1959, the marriage was over. Still, Pernell tried to stay present in his son's life, though friends said he often seemed torn between 2 worlds, the father he wanted to be and the artist he couldn't stop becoming. His next 2 marriages, to Judith Lebrecht and later Kara Nack, both ended in quiet divorces. He sought peace, but peace eluded him. Those who knew him best said he carried an invisible wall, a defense built from years of rejection, misunderstanding, and disappointment. Then came tragedy that no man could bear. In 1989, his only son, Jonathan, died in a motorcycle accident at the age of just 38. Pernell never recovered. Those close to him said the loss changed him completely, that the fire in his eyes dimmed and his once commanding voice grew softer. He stopped talking about work, about Hollywood, about anything that didn't matter deeply. He rarely spoke of Jonathan, but his silence said enough. It was the wound that never healed. In his later years, he finally found some measure of calm with his 4th wife, Eleanor Criswell, whom he married in 1997. She brought him stability and companionship, staying by his side until the end, but even she admitted there was a part of Pernell that could never rest, a part of him forever wrestling with the gap between what was and what should have been. He had spent his whole life demanding truth from the world, and found that the truth was often unbearably cruel. In the end, Pernell Roberts chose peace over a spotlight. After decades of battling the studios, producers, and even his own demons, he quietly retreated from Hollywood's noise, seeking something more lasting than fame. He continued to act, yes, guest roles in television, stage performances that reminded audiences of his unmatched depth. But gone was the young rebel demanding change from within the system. What remained was a man who had learned that integrity often comes with solitude. The 1980s brought him one last great chapter. His starring role in Trapper John, MD audiences once again saw the fire, the intelligence, and the authority that defined him. Critics praised his nuanced performance. Younger viewers, unaware of his Bonanza legacy, discovered a commanding new face. And for a time, it seemed like Pernell had finally found balance, fame and fulfillment coexisting at last. But as the years passed, he stepped further away from public life. He refused fan conventions, declined interviews, and turned down offers that didn't speak to his soul. He preferred music, nature, and deep conversation to red carpets or headlines. He donated quietly to social causes, continued to support civil rights, and never stopped believing that art should mean something. Behind the calm exterior, however, he was fighting a private battle, pancreatic cancer. He faced it with the same quiet dignity that defined his entire life. No publicity, no sympathy tour, just courage and acceptance. On January 24, 2010, Pernell Roberts passed away at his Malibu home, aged 81. He was the last surviving member of Bonanza's original cast, the final link to an era that defined television's golden age. And yet, unlike so many who had chased fame, Pernell had never been consumed by it. He left behind an estate worth nearly $10 million, but money had never mattered to him. He had once said, "Fame without meaning is just noise." While others built empires, he built a legacy of conscience. He had marched alongside Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. in Selma, demanding equality long before it was safe or popular to do so. He had spoken out against the hypocrisy of Hollywood, when the silence would have earned him comfort. And he had walked away from power not out of pride, but from the unshakable belief that art without truth is empty. In the end, his life was both triumph and tragedy, the story of a man who dared to live by principle in a world that rewards pretense. He wasn't perfect, but he was honest. And in an industry built on illusion, honesty made him unforgettable. When people remember Pernell Roberts, they think of that calm voice, that proud stance, that glint of defiance in his eyes, the man who walked away from Bonanza because he refused to say, "Yes, Pa." But what he truly left behind was a message far deeper. Real strength isn't in how long you stay in the spotlight. It's in having the courage to step away when it no longer reflects who you are. So now that you've heard the story, what do you think? Was Pernell Roberts right to walk away from one of the biggest shows in television history, to give up fortune and fame for the sake of truth? Or should he have stayed and tried to change the system from within? There's no easy answer, but one thing is certain. In a world where so many compromise for comfort, Pernell Roberts stood as a rare reminder that conviction still matters. He wasn't a saint, he wasn't a martyr, he was a man, flawed, passionate, and deeply human, who simply refused to pretend, and perhaps that's why, all these years later, we still remember him. Not just as Adam Cartwright, the quiet son of the Ponderosa, but as the rebel who wouldn't bow, the artist who demanded truth, and the man who proved that walking away can sometimes be the bravest act of all. If you believe the stories like this deserve to be remembered, if you want to keep alive the legacy of those who challenged Hollywood's glittering lies, then make sure to subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell, because here We honor the stars who refused to conform, the ones who carried light even when it cost them everything. Thank you for watching. And remember, sometimes the greatest legends aren't the ones who stayed. They're the ones who had the courage to leave.